Well, we've got winter storm warnings and winter weather advisories from the Tennessee Valley all the way up through the Northeast, bitter cold across the Midwest and plains and down into Texas. And we got some snow, and it looks like the snow drought of the 1 inch accumulation snow drought anyway will be broken or should be broken. We'll let you know if it will be right now, right here on the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast, brought to you by Tempest by Weatherflow. Get the revolutionary Tempest weather system. Join the fastest growing observing weather network on the planet. The link is on the descriptor to this podcast. And if you use the coupon code I Want a Weather Station, you will get
10% off, Joe.
Yes, 10% off. And here we are. So are we going to do it or not do it, Joe? Is the New York City, Philadelphia endless, hasn't snowed in 2 years drought, well, 1 inch of snow in 2 years drought, is that going to be broken tonight? I say yes.
Yes, I think so. It's, by the way, in case you haven't been keeping score, it's up to 701 consecutive days as of today. And it looks like, Joe, that the snow will begin falling in parts of the New York metropolitan area very shortly. And yes, I think we will see at least an inch out of this for New York within the next 24 hours.
Philadelphia had two droughts going because they actually had no snow last winter, not even a trace, and they broke that a week and a half ago when they got a trace. So that was that. Yeah, but they're going for the inch, and I kind of stayed with what I was going for, the idea of maybe a couple of inches. Some places might be up around 3 or so. Some places might be a little less. I did notice, for example, that Mount Holly, and also we show you what the Weather Prediction Center did. They upped numbers in eastern Pennsylvania to 4 to 6. I'm not, I wasn't comfortable with that. And they even upped numbers across New Jersey at 3 to 4, almost statewide. And I wasn't quite comfortable with that, so I just decided, you know what, best to remain where I am. My initial idea on this was going to be 2 to 4, 3 to 6, and I think that 2 to 3-ish range will covers it for me.
I think I agree with you. I know. On my Facebook forecast tonight, I said that on average, 2 to 3 inches of snow for at least for the lower Hudson Valley. I also mentioned, Joe, that especially along and south of Interstate 287, it would not be at all surprising if by midday and afternoon tomorrow, and even north of 287 perhaps, that a little bit of sleet might mix in, which could hold down accumulations. And I did a double take. I don't know about you, but I did a double take when I saw the forecast from NWS Upton, the New York City forecast office, going for a general 3 to 5 inches for southern Westchester, and for the Albany area, or from the Albany Weather Service, who does the forecasts for Dutchess County, Ulster, and Sullivan County, they too went 3 to 5. So if you believe both the New York and the Albany Weather Services, tomorrow we're looking at generally a 3 to 5 inch snowfall. I think actually 4 inches is about the limit. I think anything above 4 inches tomorrow will be somewhat excessive. I think, just like you, that we're going to be looking at around. And the question I asked both my daughter Maria and also Renata. I said, if we end up with 3 inches of snow in general across much of the region, I'm going 2 to 3. NWS is going 3 to 5. Who is more accurate?
Well, yeah. Well, we'll know tomorrow. The thing about to be a little careful of tomorrow is even in those areas that go over to sleet. I did notice that even the NAM at LaGuardia, for example, when I was looking at the FOOS, the T1 stays below 0, even though the T2 goes to +2. I think it did on the 18Z run or something to that. I think it was +2. And I just wonder whether some places may just wind up seeing their thermometers get stuck at around 30 or 31. And, if there's warm layer in there that it winds up being sleet or even a little bit of light rain, that there could be some glazing uh, during tomorrow during the day, and then of course we're going to see temperatures drop down to the teens and near 20 uh, Tuesday night. I don't know how much drying time there's going to be by the time the precip ends, and then we go into it gets dark. So I'm just kind of wondering whether there's going to be some icing going on in a few places before this is all said and done.
Well, there's going to be a prolongation of below freezing temperatures. We temperatures yesterday in the late afternoon dropped below freezing, and the next time we go above freezing, at least here where I am and across much of the Hudson Valley, and maybe even for a good part of the tri-state area, may not come until next Monday when the temperature jumps back up to around 35, 36. Incidentally, I'm also looking at some rather gusty winds, protracted spell of winds gusting to over 20 and 25 miles an hour from about Thursday or Friday of this week all the way through next weekend. And by the time we get to Monday, if indeed the temperatures do take a push upward above freezing, the wind should also die off a bit, won't be as harsh. Uh, After getting accustomed to the cold temperatures we're going to see much of this week, by next Monday, to some, it may even feel like the first coming of spring, because again, we'll be so acclimated to these very cold temperatures that we're going to be seeing through much. Certainly, nothing like what they're seeing in the nation's midsection, with the frigidity and temperatures at or below zero. But it is certainly a cold spell of weather that we're going to be dealing with through all of this week and on into this upcoming weekend.
Welcome to everybody on the chat board tonight, and those of you who are watching the show but not on the chat board, but just kind of lurking in the background. We're glad you're here on the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast. We're on Sunday through Thursday at 7:35 p.m. and occasionally on a Friday and Saturday. Those are normally our 2 days that we don't do a show, but if there's a storm around, we will add a show, and it's possible that we might add one for Friday. We'll see how it goes. Jeff Yinkst hits the super chat tip jar. You're new to the chat board. Welcome, Jeff. Snowing here near Harrisburg and Hershey, PA. Good to hear. It's always good to know where it's snowing outside your area, so that that it's there and that it's coming. Thank you for that report. It is most appreciated, as is all of you folks out on the chat board that are putting up information regarding snow, and it's very helpful for us as forecasters to have a good idea as to what's going on in some places that might not necessarily be near an official reporting station. And
And a few people on the chat board welcoming Jeff Yingst, although if memory serves me correct, Jeff has been on the chat board before. And in fact, this is the second time that he's hit the tip jar. I think he
oh,
did hit it last week, too. So thank
okay.
you, Jeff.
Well, if I didn't say hello the last time, I'm saying hello this time. And if you like the show, hit the like button, because Joe and I love it when we go over 100 likes, and we jump for joy when we go over 200 likes, which we've been doing a lot of lately. Okay, watches and warnings, a lot of them. We'll start up in northern Maine, where we have winter storm warnings up, and then we go to winter weather advisories for the rest of Maine, right through all of the rest of New England, the Hudson Valley, up into northeastern New York, Long Island, New Jersey, New York City, eastern Pennsylvania. This is probably, I think, Joe, the first time in 2 years that we've had like an area-wide winter weather advisory, let alone winter storm warning, but winter weather advisories for everybody in eastern Pennsylvania to southern New England. It's been a long time. And also a long time since it extended down to the Washington, D.C., Baltimore area, Delaware, much of the interior areas of Virginia. You get into West Virginia, Western Virginia, eastern and southern Kentucky. Uh, right now, about three-quarters of the state of Tennessee. It had been the whole state since last night, but the western part of the state is now out of it. Northern Alabama, northern Mississippi and parts of northwest Georgia under a winter storm warning. Although there hasn't really been very much in Georgia, they still have winter weather advisories up. For me, I haven't seen a flake or an ice pellet, Joe. Zero. In fact, it got to mid 40s here today, and for a brief moment, the sun actually came out. Believe it or not. Freeze watches and warnings along the Gulf Coast. We've got wind chill advisories in the light blue and the grayish blue areas, wind chill warnings where the wind chills are, ridiculous, double digit below zero and beyond, and that includes much of northwestern Illinois, northern half of Missouri, Kansas, Nebraska, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Winter storm warnings up in the northwest as they've just gone up, and we've got avalanche warnings up in areas from western Wyoming down through the Wasatch in Utah and even into western Colorado. So some places have warnings because of snow and of falling snow, and other places have a different kind of falling snow that they're dealing with. And not to leave out Alaska. Alaska's got one area there uh, around Nome, I think. They got winter storm warnings and winter weather advisories and all sorts of things. Looks like a blizzard warning up on the North Slope. It's probably keeping our buddy Alfred Phillips busy because we haven't seen him in a while. Uh, but very, very busy. And I think what we should do is we'll go to the radar. Now, here, the one thing that's going on, folks, the dew points today were very, very low in eastern Pennsylvania to southern New England. They were down in the low single digits and even below zero at times. So the air is very, very dry. It's taking a tough time to saturate. I'm a little underwhelmed by the radar at the moment in terms of the coverage. You got to get into those green areas in order to get at least a steady snow. And I'm going to trust the models that sort of have that blossoming out a bit as we go into the overnight period. I don't think, Joe, this is going to. I don't think we're going to see moderate snows all over the place. I think this is going to be sort of a snowfall rate, snowfall visibilities maybe gets down to 3/4 of a mile to a mile and a quarter, mile and a half. It's sort of this long, steady, light snow. It takes you about 3 hours to put down an inch, and that's another reason why you can't really go too high with these numbers. I could understand it if if we had a loaded radar. Or an impressive radar, but when you're fighting dry air, it becomes a little bit problematic. You just want it to get going, and we're sort of waiting for that to happen.
I agree. And if you remember last night, nothing against Dave Colleras, who was our guest last night, but he did show a graphic that had the leading edge of the snow past the New York City area by 8 o'clock this evening. And I had commented to Dave, I said, I think you're a little fast on that, in part due to the dry air that's over us. And I said, it seems to me like if we do see any kind of steady snow in the New York metropolitan area, it may not come until after midnight, say 1, 2 in the morning. And it looks like that very dry air is doing its thing, Joe. We may very well have virga, which is snow that's falling aloft above the New York City area, but simply it just cannot get all the way down to the ground because the air is just too dry. But it will, as we just mentioned, it will eventually moisten up enough. It'll take its sweet time. And I agree with you. We're not going to be looking through this period of snow. We're not going to be looking at, for example, the last snow that we had a little over a week ago was on that Saturday, a week ago Saturday. When the snow came in, it came in like a wall. New York City, bang, had quarter-mile visibility in heavy snow.
Right.
Of course, that didn't last very long. It maybe dropped about 0.2 of an inch, and then boom, it went over to rain or sleet. We're not going to see anything like that with this particular event coming up. I agree with you. We're going to be, generally speaking, seeing visibilities of a mile and a half, a mile, maybe 3/4 of a mile from time to time, but it's going to be more or less a gentle type of snow. And again, we may see a bit of sleet mixing in during the course of the day tomorrow, especially south of 287 in the Hudson Valley. So that, and all of these things, all of these factors, to me, keeps the snow amounts, generally speaking, at or around 3 inches, 4 inches at most, And as I said, I think the 5 inches that the Weather Service offices have been putting out, that's a little bit on the excessive side.
The place to be if you were a winter weather lover, Nashville, Joe, Nashville. When I checked last night before we went on the air, and for the few hours before we went on the air, they were in the mid-teens, and they have been there pretty much all night last night, all day today. Right now, Nashville has light snow and 12. They got
Oh,
probably about 6 to 7 inches of snow today in Nashville.
with
Um,
those kind of temperatures, that must be like a 15 or 20 to 1 ratio. That's the kind of snow that makes it all but impossible to make a good snowball or a snowman.
oh yeah, absolutely. And you can see on the radar, by the way, that we have snow going on. Now, just judging by reports, it's been reaching the ground in central and South Jersey. Not a solid, everybody seeing any kind of accumulating snow, but light stuff, some flurries in some places, maybe a little steadier in others. Also in those uh, lighter greens starting to show up in southeastern Pennsylvania, back down to Delaware, Maryland, into northeastern Virginia. You got these dark green patches here in western Virginia. That's probably where you're seeing some heavy snow going on, as well as in southern West Virginia. And right along the North Carolina state line with Tennessee, those echoes there, that's sleet and rain. And you can see I'm south of the North Carolina state line by about 20 or so miles, and I've just been, it was cloudy here all day. It was in the upper 30s and low 40s for much of the day. Then briefly the sun came out and it got to 46, and now I'm 30, 39, and still not a flake, not an ice pellet, not a raindrop. Light snows go all the way back across southern Ohio, southern Indiana, southern Illinois, over St. Louis. In fact, over St. Louis, it looks like they got a patch. I was reading from their office that they had some moderate snow there. They have patches of moderate snow going on with a temperature of 10, and light flurries and snow showers going all the way back into southern Kansas. There's nothing else really going on in the rest of the country except for some rain showers in central Florida, and that's it. So this is the one storm system, if you want to call it that. It's really more about overrunning than anything else. You got an old frontal boundary with the Arctic boundary. A little wave is going to develop on it. It really isn't going to get going until it gets up into Canada. And when you look even on the satellite loop, which I didn't refresh as I wanted everybody at least to see the way the clouds are structured. Whenever you get this sort of linear look on the southern side and on the northern side, um, that's more overrunning precip than anything else, and not you don't have that signature swirl that you look for with major storms. It's just not that kind of a setup.
Well, it's certainly all of the people who in December said we're never going to see winter and threw in the towel and said no, it's going to be another one of those winters. I mean, you gave up on on at least the cold, and here is the cold, and we've got the snow now. So I don't know what else to tell you. We were anticipating a flip to this type of weather. I admit that, we kept pushing it back, a week here, a week there, whatever like that. But it eventually got here, and it's here now.
Yes, it is. I'm just leaving a message for Awakened One on the chat board who says this is all weather manipulation, and I'm just responding by saying, yes, we are working for the secret government agency that manipulates weather. We are their primary communicators. Our handlers tell us what to say.
Yes,
Yes,
yes.
exactly. Oh God, please. These
Although
people.
the cold is not going to last, you know, for a very long time. In fact, based upon the maps I looked at today, Joe, I think come next, as I said, next Monday, we'll probably go above freezing, and that may be the beginnings of a spell of rather mild weather that could carry us almost to the end of the month.
Yes, agreed. And also seeing signs on the Ann Shambles and a few other of the long range products that the pattern changes back to something more wintry and more favorable for winter weather lovers in the eastern part of the United States. But we got to get there first, and the atmosphere has a lot of work to do. WPC WPC, the Weather Prediction Center, folks, they updated this afternoon, and when they did, they upped the percentages to 80% or higher for at least two, from Washington to Baltimore. Well, not quite to Washington. Washington's in the 60 to 70% area, but the 80% or higher covering Baltimore, Wilmington, Philadelphia, Trenton, New York City, northeastward from there, much of Connecticut, 80% or higher into Suffolk County, into east central Suffolk County, 50% to the east end. So they kind of got a little more bullish with this, and also the probability of at least four. Now, I guess maybe this is what the Weather Service looked at when WPC put, they've got a 50% or higher probability for at least four in eastern Pennsylvania and northwest New Jersey, and then on up into the Catskills. Again, I'm a little, well, look, there's probably going to be some orographic stuff going on that's going to enhance some of the snows here, so I guess it's not impossible. I just didn't really feel comfortable doing that. I know somebody Tom Contino was asking about the final call snow maps. We really didn't do, I had a map that I did a couple of days ago that I put up yesterday. There's no change. I mean, I just sort of, it's a general broad brush 2 to 3 inches. So I just don't see I didn't see the reasoning behind it to go ahead and do a final call. So I made it the call. Now, here's the Weather Service snow amounts that they're going for. Washington 3, Baltimore 3, north and west of Baltimore and Washington 4, south and east 2. In New Jersey, now this hasn't quite updated completely. I'm going to try to see if I can freshen this up. I know I'm playing with fire here because when I do this, it may just bring the same map back. But it's a weather service. The digital database tends to run a bit on the slowish side. Let me see if I can give this an update. Okay, that was quick enough. So if you change the map on this site, Joe, and then go back to the original map, it should change. And, well, it kind of did. 2 inches along the New Jersey coast. We've got 3 to 4 inches just about everywhere else. Southeast PA, Philadelphia. They've got 4 for New York City, 4 for White Plains, 4 for Poughkeepsie. Southwest Connecticut 4. Kind of numbers tail off a bit as you go further northwest. And I'm going to just run this up further north because we've got folks in New England that watch. 4 to 5 across Vermont, New Hampshire, also in Maine, although the map hasn't quite filled up for the whole state of Maine. Sorry about that. But that's happened sometimes. Some of this back here is lake effect, 22 for Buffalo in the next few days, starting from 7 o'clock tonight. 22 additional inches there. Also some big lake effect going on in western New York. Amounts come down as you head down. This is where it gets a little harder to figure when you go further south because of the fact that a lot of these areas here already have snow on the ground. So maybe there might be an additional couple of inches or so to put down on what has already been a fairly sizable snowfall. You gotta remember, Joe, you put winter storm warnings up here. You read the forecast. And in parts of southern Tennessee, they had winter storm warnings up, and they were going for 1 to 3 inches. And the criteria here for a winter storm warning is a lot lower.
And of course, yeah, you're right. There's different criteria for different locations. What one location would, say winter weather advisory, another location that doesn't see snow very often might actually, bump that up to a winter storm warning. It all depends upon where you happen to be.
We have a second system for Friday, which I think is fair to say is looking a lot less menacing than it did a few days ago. WPC still holding on to a 10 to 30% for at least a few inches Maybe it'll be a repeat performance accumulation wise, like what we got today. In the darker green, over Long Island and southeastern New England, that is a 30 to 50% chance for at least a few inches, 2 or 3. Also in the West Virginia mountains, you can see along the shores of Lake Erie, uh, back up into parts of western Michigan with lake effect, where there's high probabilities there for at least a few inches. But I'm, I'm underwhelmed by the system for Friday.
Yeah, and it's a funny thing. For the longest time, this system that we're expecting for tonight into tomorrow was thought to be the weak system, the one that's not going to. Well, it might bring us something, maybe an inch or two, but watch out for the end of the week because that's the one that looks like it's going to be a biggie, possibly explosive deepening of it. And now, as we see the situation tonight and into tomorrow, might be the quote big one, if you want to call 2 or 3 or 4 inches of big storm. And the one that's coming our way for the end of the week, Joe, I agree with you. Doesn't look a lot. It looks a lot less fearsome and threatening. Let's put it that way.
Chuck Cardillo up in the Catskills at 3,000 feet, 5 degrees there. So he's going to have, yeah, Chuck, you're going to get that dry powdery stuff with this. This is the NAM. Which NAM did I use? I brought the NAM 3 kilometer up. I've noticed the short-term models for whatever reason, be it the HRRR, the NAM 3, the NAM 12, and the globals to an extent, they're having a tough time. I mean, this is supposed to be a representation of the radar right now, and it's completely missing the stuff that's going on across southern Illinois and Indiana and into southern Ohio, and it's kind of underdoing what's just to the south. But nonetheless, as we go through the night, you can see the area does expand as the atmosphere begins to saturate, get a little bit of a wind off the ocean to help the cause, and you're going to have to do it with this. And as Joe said, this is at 10 o'clock. So I would say that if you ignore the echoes that are aloft, this is probably a better representation of the steady snow that we talked about that's coming up for tonight. That's moving up the coast and then moving up into New England. And then during the day tomorrow, right along the bulk of the accumulating snow is tonight into daybreak tomorrow. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
So anything that falls during the day tomorrow is probably not going to, after about 8 or 9 o'clock, because it's still kind of going here, 8 or 9 o'clock, you start to see most of it start to shift northward. The 3 kilometer NAM actually has a fair. I'm going to go a little close up here on this shot. Has a fair amount of sleet in the mix. So I'm going to be curious to see. It's always a good idea to pay really close attention to the low level temperatures here and how fast they rise or don't rise. Because that'll there are times where you think they're going to go up and they don't, for any number of reasons. And this might be one of those times, as they do show that area of sleet there and gets up just north of 287, and in Connecticut to about north of 15. And then, of course, as we go through the afternoon, it starts to wind down, and then in comes cold air. The very cold air, not the brutal cold, but significantly colder air comes in at night, and then we get dry out for Wednesday.
Yes, and again, I think that we're looking at. I'm just looking at the chat board here. William Huber, Joe Ray, what is the lower limits of snowfall for a winter storm warning? 5 inches. William Huber, and I think Joe will agree with me. I've never been able to get an idea of what the criteria, the specific parameters are for winter weather advisory versus winter storm warning. I don't know whether or not I've seen winter weather advisories for only an inch or two. I've seen winter storm warnings for 4 to 6. I don't know what the criteria is.
They did change the criteria. I know Boston, they changed the criteria for a number of their counties, so that I think, and I'm not 100% sure what the number was, but in some of their counties that get a lot of snow, it was raised to like 6 or 7 as
And does
opposed,
it
and then
change?
other counties are lower.
Does it
Um,
change during the season? For example, if it's February and they say, okay, winter weather advisory for 2 to 4 inches of snow, but then when you get to April and you get 2 to 4 inches, is it still a winter weather advisory, or because it's so late in the season and so unusual to see that much snow, do they change that to a winter storm warning?
yeah, that's a Bill Goodman question.
Well,
That,
get Bill Goodman on the
well,
line.
I
Call him
have
up.
he and I have to have a conversation about several different topics, but
Okay.
I will try to remember that being one of them. Now, looking at the upper air, you get this really strong flow out of Canada. I mean, whenever you see blobs of dark blue coming down, you know that's cold air. And we're looking aloft here at the very strong northwest to west flow. We've got a short wave that's sort of coming through now, but it's really hard to find. Uh, the west southwest flow over the aloft over the cold air at the surface, generating that overrunning, and then you could see a trough that's swinging through the Midwest on Tuesday, and then winds up moving through the Northeast and out. And now we're left with that upper low that you see rotating around in Canada. That's the old storm from the weekend. They went over the Great Lakes and then went up into eastern Canada. But unlike others that just kept on moving out to the east, and then we would get into a ridge, well, this one decided to hang around and rotate around. So the thing is that some of the models back days ago, there's this short wave right here running from Minnesota west into Montana, and the upper low is going to drag, kind of rotate back westward enough so this trough would dive southeastward and carve out a rather sharp looking short wave. But what seems to be happening is that upper low to the north is so overwhelming that short wave, yeah, it's there, but it's not impressive. It's kind of on the flattish side when it heads to the east, and as a result, we're going to see a fairly suppressed look to things with this system. Here it is, right there. So the upper low, that short wave comes down, but it's hard. You can't even find it. And the upper low to the north just drops southeastward. And here's another thing, Joe, from earlier. This upper low was forecast to drop down into Pennsylvania and Virginia. Okay, that's back on the model runs about 4 or 5 days ago when it had a wrapped up low sitting off the New Jersey coast. Well, guess what? Instead of dropping down there, it drops down into upstate New York and southeastern Canada as sort of a broad cutoff that moves over Maine and Nova Scotia. You cannot get a big you cannot get a big snowstorm with something like that. Uh, what
Exactly.
what you can get is kind of a minor event, um, depending on depending on even with a low well offshore, with a wind coming in off the warm ocean and cold Arctic air coming down, you could wind up seeing snow on Friday into Friday night, and I think that's the best way to approach this. Especially now that it's Monday and we're talking about something on Friday, it's hard for me to imagine that this upper pattern that's being shown by the models, and they're all there, they're all on the same page with this. Um, in fact, I looked at if you look at the icon would say you probably would get just a few snow showers and snow flurries and maybe an inch, and that would be it. I don't know if that's right, but it's hard for me to envision that all the models are suddenly going to flip to something that's more dynamic. It just doesn't. There's too much. There's too much cold. In a sense, there's too much cold air.
And that'll do it. That sometimes, and we've been saying that for a long time. People say, when is it going to get cold so we can have snow? Where's the cold? Where's the cold? Well, be careful what you wish for, because sometimes you get a little bit too much of the cold and the atmosphere gets too dry. And sometimes it forces potential snowmakers to our south. And, that's the story, Morning Glory.
Yes. All right, so here's what it looks like on the surface. This is the GFS with tonight's system. You see a low there well off the North Carolina coast that suddenly decides it's going to be near Montauk. I don't know, models, they always seem to want to do that recently, and that's why maybe the coast loses it. or potentially loses it at the end. I don't think it's going to make a difference in terms of accumulation. And then that goes out. We get into this really cold air, but not the brutal air. That's that played itself out across the Midwest down into the plains, and then high to the south goes out. Now we got another Arctic boundary, and you see snow there breaks out again in Kentucky and Tennessee. Yes, in Nashville for Thursday night, and eventually you get a low that pops up off the North Carolina coast. It's to me this is like a big yawn, and then it just goes out east northeast. By Friday, the thing that struck me, yes, last night, I was looking at the GFS, and what struck me was the fact that when I went back a couple of days ago to look at that run where it had that big low off the East Coast and compared it to the same time frame, Joe, the low was just 600. The low was just 600 miles further east, just 600 miles. And all I could think of was if it's two major storms head to the Great Lakes, show up on the model 7 days in advance, tracking somewhere between Chicago and Detroit, guess what? That's exactly where they went. Okay? The models didn't budge an inch on that. All of the three major global models were completely centered on that, and for both storms, they pretty much nailed them. It comes to something on the East Coast, it's a whole different ball game.
Yep. Yep.
And and,
Well,
and that 600-mile difference, Joe Lopresti, was more impressive. Was made worse by the fact that we're not talking about something out 240 hours and beyond. We were talking about something inside 120 hours. There should not be a 600-mile difference, going from 120 hours to say 96 hours, okay, in those two runs. I mean, there should not be a 600-mile difference in the low position. But there was. I mean, it was just, I just had, just gave me a big laugh. So maybe we'll get some snow. I think, Joe, with these falling thicknesses, as the low goes out to the east, and you've got like an east northeast wind that goes northeast, and colder air is coming down from eastern Canada into that moist ocean flow. That might generate, it almost looks like ocean effect, really. And maybe that gives you a couple of inches, and then that goes out. It gets very cold. The one thing I disagree with the Weather Service, I was looking with their forecast lows for Friday night, and they've got upper teens for lows. I think that's way too high.
way too high.
Way too high.
Um, I
Um,
said back to Renata yesterday, I was looking at some of the local television weathercasters here in New York, and they had high temperatures on the weekend, this upcoming weekend, 27, 28 degrees. And I shook my head vigorously and said, that's way too warm.
well,
Again, I think we're going to be looking at mid and low 20s. And again, the other thing that I mentioned at the top of the show, the winds. We're going to have some gusty winds here Friday into the weekend that's going to make it feel much, much colder. That's why next week, next Monday, when the temperatures probably for the first time for many in over a week jump above freezing to the mid 30s, and with the winds dying down, it's going to feel like springtime out there. But until then, we're going to be in for a spell of cold weather. And we have one guy on the chat board, Junik Haufman, and I won't say, he says this winter, I'm not even going to say the word, but he says Long Island is the new Alabama. Oh, wait a minute, it snows in Alabama. LOL.
right.
Winter, no, in southern New England. So, where are you from, Jurek? Where, I mean, like, how much colder does it have to get in order for it not to do what you say it does, or whatever? I mean, this week is about as wintry as what we have seen over the last 2 years, and I don't know, Joe. You
I
can't
know.
you can't make everybody happy.
Yeah. Well, they all have this sort of Dickens view about what winter should be like, and it's just never like that. This setup, by the way, also for Friday night and Saturday, if there's snow cover on the ground with a north-northwest wind blowing straight down the Hudson Valley. And I was looking at the soundings here just a moment ago. This is for Saturday morning. It had, New York City at 14, Poughkeepsie at 6. The Weather Service digital forecast had upper teens to low 20s. Yeah, to me, I think it's going to be upper single digits to low teens for lows, and maybe upper teens to low 20s for highs on Saturday. And then Sunday will moderate a little bit. The 540, the magical 540 rain snow line thickness, we get down to a 504 thickness. I mean, which is really very, very cold. And that's Saturday morning, okay? And then by Monday afternoon, that 540 thickness is up in southern New Hampshire and across upstate New York. So that's how fast this cold air is going to pull out, and it is going to pull out. And then next week just kind of looks blah. Will be warmer than normal. Uh, doesn't look like we have any big storms to worry about. Uh, Maybe some, I don't know, rain or showers along about Thursday into Friday. Hard to say at this early stage. Get Sal Blandino upset because then it might rain on my birthday weekend. Uh, Both, in the Northeast and down in the Southeast, if this is right. And just to really quickly, we'll take a look at the ensembles here uh, for the next two weeks or so. And just I'm going to go to the North America view. Let me just roll this back. These are the 18Z ensembles, and then we could take a look at the European ensembles. But this is what we have, okay, at the moment. Big high pressure, higher than normal heights across the Arctic. That Arctic oscillation was strongly negative. The NAO was you know not super strong negative, but negative enough. And they're all rushing up to the neutral line, which is why we're seeing all this winter weather here, and then that system for Friday, which is going to wind up developing offshore. Uh, and then it disappears. The AO goes positive, and suddenly you go, in a matter of about 4 or 5 days, you go from high pressure to low pressure across the Arctic region, and we lose the cold air. And not only do we lose the cold air, Joe, but we've got a bit of a fire hose here from the Pacific. So that's just gonna mean for warmer than normal temperatures next week. But as we go through this over
Call it
time,
call it January if you want.
yes, but as we go through this over time, this is now we're up to January 27th and the 28th. The ridging in the east completely disappears uh, late in the forecast period, and we're starting to see the trough coming back. You can see the lower heights, the blue, spreading down across eastern Canada and starting to move into parts of the Northeast. You're also seeing ridging up in the West Coast. The fire hose from the Pacific is pretty much gone. So yeah, that's got we're assuming that that's going to happen. So we're going to have to pay attention to this, because if that winds up getting delayed for whatever reason, it could become problematic. And when we look at the European ensembles, what's interesting to note about the European ensembles to me is, I mean, the same thing. You got that Pacific fire hose that comes, but it doesn't last long. You suddenly ridging starts to build in the west. The ridge in the east begins to weaken, and the pattern normalizes on the European about 2 or 3 days, a couple of days faster than the GFS. And it's got a long wave trough there from northern, north central, well, whatever that is, that island up there. What is that? Is that Baffin Island, Joe?
I think it's Baffin Island,
From
yeah.
Baffin Island right down the eastern seaboard. So this would suggest, that the Europeans saying that the GFS is, but they're both on the same page, and that the pattern that we're going into next week is just going to be a 1 week thing, and then we're going to go back to something a bit more dynamic. And you know what? We'll check the climate models really quick. The CFS, the Canned Forecast You Know What model. But the last run, we showed this last night. So the last run that's on the board here is, oh, this is a little different. Um, look at this. So this is right now. So this is from the 21st to the 28th. And then from the 28th to the 4th, you go from this warm Pacific flooding, pattern to this cold ridge in the west, trough in the east scenario. So the CFS is doing what the ensembles are doing, and the CFS actually holds that trough through just about the whole month of February. So That might prove very interesting if this winds up verifying in the long range.
Johnny Quest, thank you very much for hitting the chat, hitting super chat. And Joe, he points out that parts of Alaska had minus 74. I presume that's Fahrenheit, minus 74 actual air temperature, not a wind chill, minus 74 actual ambient air temperature in parts of Alaska. I don't know what part he is alluding to. My thought is it probably is in northern Alaska, somewhere north of Fairbanks, somewhere between Fairbanks and Barrow, I guess. But that's cold. We haven't seen those kind of temperatures up in Alaska in quite some time either. So it's winter,
It
regardless of
is.
whatever you say. It is winter this week.
Yep. All right, folks, we're going to wrap it up tonight just a little bit early because Joe and I have been just you know going almost every day for the last 2 weeks now. So we're going to just cut the show short. We went an hour and a half last night. We went another 15 minutes after you left. We're not going to get to 200 likes, but that's just the way it is.
He did
And
ring the bell though at 100.
yes,
There you
okay.
go.
And
So,
thanks again for everybody being here tonight. Joe and I will be back tomorrow night at the usual weather podcast time of 7:35 p.m. Eastern. And Joe, you have a couple of people to say thank you to.
oh well, I know Johnny Quest and Jeff. I don't have his name written
Oh,
down. I
we
know
hold
he
on.
hit the tip jar last week. I know that, and he hit it tonight. So Jeff and Johnny, thank you very much for hitting the. I'll the tomorrow night. I
It's
most
Jeff
definitely
Jeff Yingst.
yeah. There you go.
Jeff
I'll
Yingst.
most definitely have my pad and pencil tomorrow night to list all of the literally dozens of people who hit the tip jar tomorrow night.
Yes, and Dave is on. Dave's on the chat board again, but we got to go. Oh, we got another super. Leon Probitsky hits the tip jar.
Thank you, Leon.
Thank you, Leon. All right, folks. We'll see you tomorrow. Have a great day. Enjoy the snow. Hopefully, we'll get the 2 to 3. Because if we do, I'll be happy, and Joe will be happy, and the snow lovers could stop talking about that godforsaken drought. And we'll see you tomorrow. Night, night.
Good night, folks.